I would like to start with is not to ask you not what you expect from the budget or what you'd like to see in the budget, but what would you not like to see? If you could just, the 2 or 3 things which in your view, whose presence in the budget is going to send either bad signals or is actually going to be bad for business. So what are the 3 top items in your don't want list? So shall we start from this side? From one of
Sure. Look, this budget, of course, comes at a time when things are very critically poised. And I agree, a budget's not meant to be a make or break document. It's just an annual summary of how the government's finances are expected to be. But what I think at this juncture we would not like to see is status quo. We would not like to get a sense of deja vu where the government sort of repackages stuff and makes a show of pumping up investment, when in reality the revised estimates are often significantly different from the budget estimates. So we don't want a path on that track. I think what everybody is looking for are clear signals, clear directions on fiscal consolidation. What's the government's view? Are they committed to that? Certainly international investors are looking for that. So it's a bit of a conundrum. I start by saying budget's meant to be a dull affair, it's just meant to be a summary of all that's happening. But this time, I think the reality is somewhat different. And so therefore, in that sense, there's also a great opportunity to demonstrate leadership.
I'll come back to you on one point out there, but quickly on taxes, the big no-nos.
We would not want the fiscal deficit to go down. We would believe that it is right time to actually broaden the fiscal deficit and pump in more money into infrastructure and not just merely focus on Make in India brand. Second, what we hear is that government is planning to introduce capital gains tax even on trading that you do on the capital markets. This is the most unwanted, highly undesirable situation which anybody here would want to see. Correlated to that is dividend distribution tax. Again, I think government is planning to sort of do away with the dividend distribution tax and again levy tax in the hands of individuals. There is no room for retro taxation, and we believe that is not something, even if the notices are being issued to Vodafone and likes of Vodafone, we believe there won't be any direction in terms of retroactive, but it will be all prospective.
Mr. Rao, your sector, of course, is facing tough times right now. What would you not like to see in the budget? What would make life even more difficult for you?
Today, if I really look at the industry is suffering for lack of demand in the market. So if demand has to be brought in, then there should be a stimulating activities or more expenditure in the budget. But always we hear the arguments that the fiscal consolidation vis-a-vis the growth. So while doing that finer balance, if growth is postponed in order to achieve fiscal consolidation, then the industry will suffer again. So what we don't want to see is fiscal consolidation has to be done, but the growth should not be postponed. How do we achieve that? In order to achieve that, how do we do the expenditure management? What are the steps the government is looking at? How the expenditure, which is quite substantial under various heads, how they will be able to manage efficiently to get more money to spend on the growth, one. Two is not increase taxes. Without increasing taxes, how they do administration measures to increase the taxes, widen the tax base, more amount would be available to spend on the growth. So fiscal consolidation and the growth, a fine balancing act is required. Second point which everybody is looking forward is the tax reforms. On the tax reform side, GST. A roadmap has been given 1st of April 2016, GST will be rolled out, whereas we are now don't know what it is. We don't want to see again a date, but which cannot be achieved. The third area which really industry is looking forward is that there is a huge debate again which is happening, protection versus level playing field. So government should not in hurry in the budget should take a step to ensure that this level playing field which is being created is removed, or any step that will impact the domestic industry by way of a dumping where global industries are not doing well, global economy is not doing well, they are looking for India for dumping, that should be stopped. I don't want any step where government will take, where level playing field gets diluted.
What are the things that you would not like to see in the budget? What are the, a couple of things which you feel would send either have a negative impact or just send the wrong signals?
The first thing that comes to my mind is the much talked about GST. And now I hear that in order to be able to push it through, there may be some significant compromises that might be made in the overall GST structure. That is a cause for concern. I think consensus building is important in the interest of what is good for the nation rather than as a policy of appeasement. I think the growth aspect is dependent on a lot of infrastructure investment that needs to happen in the public space.
Mr. Revankar, top things Mr. Jaitley should avoid.
The speculation or suspense on various taxation. I think the time has come that the government has to give a long-term plan on clarity on all the taxation issues, which has been hanging for the last 4 or 5 years, especially after the GAR. So that is the one thing which comes to me on the top. And the second is any control on expenditure, on especially infra, should not be there, because they have to not only announce, they should also give a plan of execution. We don't see execution, we only see announcement. So that's where I think the budget has to talk about execution and clear path on spending.
Dr. Singh.
I have no demands. I have a simple, humble wish list. And I would like to bring maybe another aspect in the debate, because India cannot look only by itself. You are very much in the focus of international markets. This is one of the actions Mr. Modi with all his visits has made. So whatever you do in the budget will be reflected, and they are sitting outside India, a lot of people which will have a deeper look to that. And when I come from this point of view, if I sit on the chair from the outside and you ask me what I don't like to see, I would really strongly recommend don't do anything which endangers what you said, the financial stability. I believe you have shown in the last 1.5 years a rather prudent policy by the RBI how to handle inflation and to balance census rate.
Yes.
When you compare that what happens in Europe, it's a disaster. The Homo economicus, the mathematical model is not working. Whatever they do, they don't get it under control. Also, what I wish, don't make too much changes on this end. Having said that, the next, which is of importance, I would really recommend or wish, don't be very careful when you come to protectionism, where you bring in or subsidies. Also, please don't push it in one way. Otherwise, the idea of Make in India to attract investments, to attract also investment on the private sector, also here in India, will not work. And all that finally needs to be addressed in the GST, in the new one. And what is required is maybe also more innovative, and Indians are very innovative financing system, how you handle that. This is, in my opinion, hasn't really an input when we talk about infrastructure. Infrastructure is not just to build a home. Infrastructure is long gestation periods. So you are talking about financing schemes which are going 10, 20 years. And how to finance that, to restructure that in periods. This is what I mean to review that and to go there maybe a new, more innovative way.
Let's look at the big picture first, the fiscal deficit. And I think the demands for a sort of deviation from the FRBM Act to have a slightly larger fisc is the hope that the government will spend that money to pump prime the economy. As somebody who rates countries as well as companies, what would you give greater weightage to? Would you just give greater weightage to a mathematical deviation in the budget or the quality of deviation?
Look, let's get some basic principles clear. We've got an incredibly busy government, and the government builds roads, it runs steel plants, it runs banks that funds these. It's an incredibly busy. Now, is it the most efficient deployer of capital? And that debate's open. I think there's any amount of research that says that the governments need not necessarily be the most efficient deployer of capital. In fact, there are studies that show that if the government's share intervention in the banking system reduces, X percentage, that's an automatic kicker to the GDP, So I think from a long-term perspective, that's the point I made, the market expects lesser and lesser government's involvement. We don't want a busy government, we don't want government in business, but we want government as a facilitator, which is the point that you said. So my short point is everybody expects a long-term, and so therefore back to the FRBM, I think everybody expects commitment. Everybody expects that to be on track. So there could be deviations, and that's true for most economies. But if the sovereign expects rating upgrades, I think FRBMs is a critical tool that needs to be. Because the flip side of keeping to FRBM is ensuring that you have a conducive environment that facilitates growth, that facilitates investment. So if you are going on the other side of FRBM, it's an admission that your policies aren't working.
When you talk about very large projects, giga projects, what do you think is needed to get that confidence back in the economy so that people are willing to take big bets on the economy?
India is a story of domestic consumption. While we continue to certainly push and chase exports, exports are not going to be that easy considering the state of global economy and the competition which will continue from China, which is also wanting to keep its economy afloat. So if you want to really drive domestic consumption, while Make in India is a laudable effort being made, I think generating demand is critical. So driving domestic consumption and generating demand, retail industry plays an extremely important role, but you will be probably surprised to know that retail doesn't enjoy industry status. So it's about thinking little long term in terms of what is needed for some systemic correction in terms of generating demand, and generating demand through improving supply and driving consumption, and therefore driving manufacturing and growth. That is one of the keys. The second point you talked about was capital. I think capital alone will not play the most important role. Capital coupled with technology will make a big difference. So if you look at the economies of Japan, Korea, Taiwan, in the last 40, 50 years, I think the focus on technology also was significant. And high technology industries coming up in the country makes them more self-sufficient. And it's not just about doing some outsourcing work for other countries. So that is the second part in terms of thinking about capital and technology, and I think attracting that capital from outside the country.
Yeah, if you look at the core infrastructure sector as a whole in this country today, I mean, there are 2 or 3 key choke points. What kind of a workaround can we develop? What is it? And industries do find solutions. When you need to, you find a solution. So what is the kind of solution which can be found and where it can help with a little bit of assistance, a little bit of policy assistance from the government? And also, I would like to, hear your thoughts on really sort of addressing the PPP problem, because to my mind, that's another big issue which needs to be tackled, and that's much more tackleable, actually.
No, I think the way we need to understand as far as the current issues relating to the stimulating investments and why investors, either domestic or foreign, are feeling little uncomfortable or inconvenient. Majorly, when you are starting the game, when you announce the rules, don't change the rules in between when the game is played. So retrospective amendments or certainty as regards to whatever is announced in the beginning, I think they should continue. This type of assurance is required. Point two is, if we understand the total investments which are happening in India per annum is around 30 lakh crores. Out of these 30 lakh crores, if I look at the capital plan outlay, including through public sector undertakings, is approximately around 5,50,000 crores. Plus the state governments, another 2,50,000 crores. Balance amount has to come from private sector or household investments. So the government, what is required to be done in order to ensure that this 30 lakh crores not only spent, but also get accelerated. But money is not getting spent. So decision making in the government side, if I really understand, clearly Kelkar committee has recommended, you should distinguish when a decision is taken, a genuine error versus malified intention. As regards to the private investments, PPP is very much essential, we all know that. So in the PPP already identification has been done. Leave alone the decision making from the government side when a PPP project is to be implemented. You look at litigations, you look at arbitration process. Whenever anybody wants to set up an infrastructure project which will take 25, 30 years to get the returns, during the process, if any litigation arises among the stakeholders, how to resolve those litigations? Arbitration Act requires immediate change. Thereby, how to ensure that litigations are resolved as early as possible. There should be a dispute resolution mechanism, how it can be resolved quickly. Thereby, private sector can come in and make investments in infrastructure projects, so that the 30 lakh crores minus the 6 lakh, 7 lakh crores through government, that can get accelerated as far as the private sector is concerned. So PPP model which we have requires to be tweaked very, very urgently. Next, government is concerned when 6 lakh, 7 lakh crores of money is to be made available for spending without any slash in that expenditure, without compromising on the fiscal consolidation point of view. How do we do that? You look at expenditure side, what government, where they are spending. Interest payable on the total government debt of 68 lakh crores of rupees is 4,50,000 crores is the interest. Then if I look at total government debt of 68 lakh crores of rupees, 2 lakh crores is external debt, balance all internal. We raise it within India. The same issue, again, if I look at next item is subsidy, 2,50,000 crores of subsidy. Whenever we talk about subsidy, we talk about incentive to the industry. Incentive to the industry, already there is a roadmap which has been given in the direct tax code. When you are collecting 34% of tax, remove the incentives, there is no problem for the industry. But then reduce the tax rate quickly. In the budget, if you don't reduce the tax rate, take incentive, you are overburdening the industry. So management of debit side is very, very important, which we all should look for. In addition to fiscal consolidation and managing the receipts point of view, how do we ensure that there is no litigation, the taxpayers will become comfortable, not overburdening the industry, putting cesses every time. So there are so many other irritants are overburdening the industry where we are losing our competitiveness if I really look at it. Logistics cost, we always talk, we have huge amount of logistics cost in India. So investment in infrastructure is very much essential. So look at the Kelkar committee recommendations, they are very clear. Prevention and Corruption Act, make change. Arbitration Act, change. Risk and reward, you properly allocate among all the stakeholders. Huge amount of investments can come in by doing simple things, which already recommendations are in place today. In my view, we have a huge potential. India is a very, very attractive relative to others. Our macroeconomic indicators are very, very good. It is a great opportunity, in fact, in our view, to give a huge fillip in the budget, addressing these issues, thereby stimulating investment and creating demand in India can come in.
Specifically, what would you actually like to see in this budget?
You have to be fast and you have to be flexible. You need a strategy, but you must be prepared tomorrow to change it because you are surprised by that. You have not the long circuits. A lot of things are happening simultaneously.
Mr. Revan, what would you like to see?
Basically, the Make in India really happened because One of the major thing what is I feel preventing Indian goods manufacturer to be competitive in the world is the logistic cost. Logistic cost in India is 13 to 14% of the final value of the goods. So to fix that, one is GST is something which will definitely help. This coupled with the focus on MSME segment, because cottage and MSME segment gives the maximum the employment.
Mr. Iyer, what about you? What would you like to see?
So, one thing which I already said, which is about giving industry status to retail, will make a big difference to the growth of retail industry. The second key thing which can be done, according to me, is certain aspects of land reforms. And the third aspect, which currently isn't getting much attention, 45% of GDP is in agriculture, but it provides only 12% employment, which means that the agricultural wealth is concentrated in few hands. Small farmers, how to make small farmers and land owned by small farmers more productive by giving them some substantial inputs on technology particularly.
Mr. Rao, specifically, just your say, top of your wish list for the budget.
No, if we want really very accelerated growth in India and also job creation, we need a very, very strong banking sector. So there should be a clear roadmap in the business, in the budget. How do they address as far as the capitalization of the banking system, and how do they make it stronger to finance the growth, whatever steps that will be taken by the government?
What do you think can be done here? That yes, we do need more money. We would like to see the government spend more on productive, expenditure. To fund that, you need more revenue. So how do we do that? How do you sort of sort this problem?
I mean, the answer is very simple. How do you enhance taxes? It's simple. You have to widen your tax base. And obviously, which means that government has to improve its analytics, government has to scale up the technology. We need to sort of ensure that once we get GST in place, obviously, that will also result into a widening tax base on an indirect tax front.
Mr. Bhoumik, absolutely the last word.
What we are looking for is a signal that the government wishes to be an enabler and a facilitator rather than dabbling into too many things. So I think this is a good time for the government to look at where the stress points are. I think it will do great for sentiments if the finance minister says that, as a government takes the leadership and articulates some of these intents of the government. I think he has the capacity to do that. So that's one pillar. So show that we are taking our job as enablers very seriously, and we're going to make sure that policy works in favor of of people who are executing this project.
It's a make or break budget for this government. Critical time for the economy, and let's hope that we get to see some of the things that were discussed today. Thank you very much.